COVID-19 and the holidays on this episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog. Welcome to Shareable Science. Science you can share. So it's mid-November, and we find ourselves torn between two competing storylines. On the one hand, we've got multiple vaccine candidates that are giving us positive news from their clinical trials. And that's an incredibly positive thing. On the other hand, we're seeing increasing case numbers really all over the country, actually all over the world, and the rising worry that goes along with that. And now we face the holidays, a time when we traditionally get together with people for multiple hours in indoor spaces and we eat and sing and laugh together. How do we navigate through that? Let me first start by saying I am not here to be the Grinch who stole Christmas, to tell you you should not be doing any of these things, that you should not be seeing other people, that you should not be celebrating. These are joyful times of the year, and in any way that we can, we safely want to look for ways that we can acknowledge that we can celebrate with those that we love. But I think the reality is we have to think about doing that a little bit differently. So we're going to talk about two analogies in this episode. The first one you've already seen. Back in June, we made a video about thinking about risk and about measuring your risk exposure, thinking about it as a jar, your own individual jar of exposures, and the different activities as different sized balls. At that point in time, I told you that the size of your exposure jar, the size of your risk jar, was dependent on your own factors like your health and your age, and factors of the health and age of the people that are around you. But we also talked about the size of your jar being impacted by factors outside your control, specifically the spread of the virus in your community and the trend of that spread. Here in North Alabama, where I'm based, we now see almost 20% positive results from COVID-19 tests, and that's a continuing upward climb. Other places around the state or around the country may be lower, but in general, most places are seeing an increase in the number of cases. And I think that means it's wise for us to consider a slightly smaller exposure jar and think about fewer things that fill it. I also think it's important to note, I'm not telling you to keep the lid on. There are things that we can do with exposures, but I'm asking us to think about how we potentially think about smaller exposures, stepping down a level in terms of risk with the behaviors of the way that we get together. So that could mean that you're outside with individuals. It could mean that if you're inside, you've got the windows open and everybody puts on a sweater. It could mean that you're gathering with a smaller number of people or for a shorter period of time. You can still have joy. You can still love those traditions. Your mother-in-law's pecan pie will still taste as good if you are enjoying it outside, or if you've actually split it up and you're eating it in different places and you're talking by FaceTime. So that's our first analogy, remembering exposure and intentionally thinking about how we do the things that we love in ways that step the risk down a notch. Here's your second analogy. I want you to imagine a stream with a set of stepping stones going from one end to the other. We stand on one side of that stream, and on the other side of the stream is where we'll be when vaccines are widely available. But to get there, we have to navigate across a set of stepping stones, some with bigger gaps, some stepping stones that might be uneven. And the water in the stream has risen, so the likelihood that we get a little bit wet has gone up. Now, for some of us, stepping off the stone just means we get our shoes muddy. That's an inconvenience, but not a big deal. For other people, stepping off the stones actually may plunge them in pretty deep, maybe even over their head. So we have to figure out as a community how we take steps, number one, to try to help everybody navigate from one side to the other, And number two, how we try to do things that keep the water level from continuing to rise. So, what do we do individually with our own exposures? And what do we think about in terms of the exposures for those around us? Again, the holidays are meant to be joyful times together with family and friends and those that we cherish. This year, we can still do that, but we have to think about it in different ways. That doesn't mean it's gone. That doesn't mean it's canceled. It means we think about it in a different approach, but still find ways to celebrate. I hope that this is useful. I also hope you take it in the spirit in which it is meant, not telling you what to do. You're grown-ups. You know how to make your decisions. Just giving you some guidelines to think about. The Centers for Disease Control has done a great job of listing out potential ways that you can think about reducing risk in your family gatherings. We'll put a link in for you to actually take a look at that and think about how that applies in your own situation. Thank you for watching this episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog. I look forward to seeing you again. Take care.